these men occupy spaces in menopause organizations. I've seen them in stillbirth groups where they go in and they pretend that they've had a stillbirth or they've had a miscarriage or they're infertile. I mean, there is nowhere these men won't go to feel validated in their fetish, including amongst so-called GC feminists.
So this is an interview with Kellie-Jay Keen for Missident magazine. Kellie-Jay is the fabulously uncompromising women's rights campaigner who is fighting to protect the female sex category. We're talking about the division, the rift within her own movement, those women who are trying to push back against gender ideology. It's a broad movement, women from all different walks of life, writers, academics, journalists, feminists. And you might assume that those who are trying to protect the female sex category would themselves decline from referring to a man as she in the public domain. You definitely assume that they would challenge a man who is open about how he's sexually attracted to himself when he presents as a woman, especially one who's a teacher who works in schools and has the students refer to him as Miss. However, this week, Debbie Hayton, formerly David Hayton, was quite widely and sympathetically profiled in the mainstream media, including by, and this is where things got quite tense in the gender critical movement, including by Julie Bindel, who's a very well-respected feminist writer who's been campaigning against gender ideology for a long time. In his interview with Julie Bindel, Debbie Hayton goes into quite a lot of detail about his attraction to himself as a woman, a sense known as autogynephilia.
Although the idea of transition was, that was erotic in its view, 10 years later, goodness gracious, it's not as if heterosexual couples retain that level of erotic further.
So Kellie-Jay says that language is everything. By being polite and calling men she, by using terms like trans woman, identifying as a woman, and generally making space for men like Hayton, the feminist elite make it impossible for others to speak up and fight for their rights, and that they leave normal everyday women exposed to sometimes quite disturbed and predatory men in their bathrooms, hospitals, even in stillbirth support groups, as she talks about. So we discussed class divisions in the gender critical movement and why she sees honesty and directness of speech as one of the key political issues of our time.
I think there are the two things that I think are going on is one, a political class or an elite class, some sort of sourdough WhatsApp, where they're deciding. It just does feel like that. I was trying to categorize it the other day as to what it is, and it's not quite a Waitrose thing. It's not a money thing. It's I sort of call them the know-betters. They know better than you. You're just too peasant-like to ever win. It's what that sort of class does to anybody fighting for their rights, as we saw with the post office recently. What they do is they push you into a place where you sound unreasonable, you become emotional, and then what they can do is like, oh, those silly people with their silly emotions, and but the stuff in the movement, I think, is a sweet win, because I didn't realize it was going to be so patently obvious to everybody that actually we are fighting two different things, and one of them is status quo and saving our own vested interest, self-serving interests, and the other is actually genuinely wanting to go back to a place where women felt that their rights were actually genuinely progressive and progressing. And I think that what's giving away language is certainly not that.
The t-shirt's fine. You're the new money of the whatever.
Yes, yeah.
I get it. But the t-shirts didn't say, please don't come in our sports and spaces. The t-shirt said women, adult, human, female. So you've pinned your campaign to a kind of a categorical position on truth, on language, right from the start.
Yes.
And it sounds like you're saying the thing that they're willing to give away is the core of your movement.
I think it is. I don't think anyone's doing it badly. So in these little sort of places where they're all chatting, I think they're all going, oh yeah, but this is this, isn't it? And oh, and what about this? And I think it's sort of a gossipy, and then they all come to a little bit of a position, and then they end up using the same language and words to describe people that disagree with them. Now, I don't think that Julie Bindel made a strategic decision to interview Debbie Hayton about his autogynephilia. I don't think she did that saying, I'm going to promote this man's fetish. I do, however, think it really does go against everything that I think most people thought she stood for. And I think that's what's happening here. And I think there have been much of the really bad behavior over the last 10 days has been centered around defending a man and his fetish. Like, this man has thrown a grenade in this movement, and some women have come out fighting for this man. And all of those women happen to be the sort of women that would also tell you to vote Labour, despite everything they would. These other people who are willing to give away those words that women much worse off than them in really precarious positions, they do it. And then these other women are basically saying, well, it's, by virtue of saying it's a polite thing to do, they're saying to those other women, it isn't polite. And then what happens when there's the next sacking or HR meeting? They can say, well, Janice Turner of the Times, she says it's polite. People on your own side say it's respectful. So therefore you are disrespecting your colleague by saying he.
Or she's saying it's wrong, but it's okay when I do it because I've proved that I understand it.
Which is so much worse. It's worse,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, I didn't know if I was reading that into it because I'm a horrible cynic. But there was that element.
I can do it because I really do know why I shouldn't do it. And which is the Debbie Hayton argument. I shouldn't do it. I know I shouldn't do it. You know I shouldn't do it. And yet we're all going to agree, because we're all in the knowledge that I shouldn't do it, that I can do it with your blessing. Thanks very much. And she said, we get them in here, hushed voices, we get them in here, and we're not, they spend a long time in the changing rooms, and they do make all the other ladies feel really uncomfortable in the changing rooms. There's nothing I can do because I can't afford to lose my job. So how would I then, after getting support from a woman like that, turn around and say, well, I'm just going to say the word she. I'm just going to use she because it's polite and respectful. Isn't that what her bosses are telling her? Going back to Debbie Hayton, it's like he got invited. Now, I suspect he did get invited to use the women's toilets. And I expect that conversation went something like this. I'm now Debbie Hayton. I don't want to use women's spaces. I would never put myself in that place. I would never insist that you did that. And then women, rather than going, all right, then, fair enough, thanks, great, good, that makes us feel good. It only takes one of them to say, of course you can. Of course you can come in. We would never, we see you as a woman. We would never want to keep you out. And I think it's those tricks.
Do you feel comfortable with me using, female toilets?
Oh my God, of course.
I would. Does that depend on me having had surgery?
No.
It's really weird, isn't it? It's like, well, he says he's and I'm just going to say pervert, because I think that like perversions, autogynephilia, I think would be recognized as a perversion. So it's like a deviant sexual fetish. And he's like, I am that. And everyone goes, yeah, he is that. And he's like, but I still do it in schools, and that's okay, isn't it? Because I say that I am that. And everyone's like, yeah, that's absolutely fine. The cognitive dissonance is crazy. The reason we had the GRA in 2004, and the reason in the 90s, when they were talking about the GRA in Parliament, the reason it got through is because exactly the sort of men like Debbie Hayton. It's the reasonable, rational face of this fetish that have pushed all this stuff into our schools, into our police forces, everywhere. And it's like we've never had the paedophile information exchange or other nefarious kind of cults and ideologies that haven't done exactly the same, which is to infiltrate our public services, our judiciary, our education systems, and then kind of poisoned it from within. He's exactly that.
Choosing our language carefully so that we do not alienate people who would otherwise agree with us is everything. And just finally, she says our approach is yielding results. Do you sympathise with that position at all?
I do, as long as there's proof of these tangible gains of taking people from the left, which I don't think there is. I don't think there are many people. I think, look, once you're fixed in the idea that a woman has a penis and that it's perfectly okay to pause a child's puberty, and even in these conversations, there's like, but sometimes, no, not sometimes, never. It's never okay to pause a child's puberty. Never. They're about bringing in families and stopping the very urgent harm to children. That's not the fight that I'm doing. That's obviously, I don't want that to happen either. But what I'm trying to do in public is change the fact that people feel they can't talk about something. So I know most women, you ask anybody, even people that are on the other side, who will refuse to answer these questions, but do you want, when your 85-year-old granny goes into hospital, do you want there to be like a 45-year-old bloke in a bad wig in the bed next to her in the female-only ward? Or do you want that man who calls himself Gemma to go and give your grandmother sort of home help when she's alone?
Smear test in the case of News This Week. Smear
it's just nonsense. So I think that's the fight I'm having. I'm having the fight of saying to people, it's sounding the alarm. Do you know what's going on? But I think that comes down to the honesty thing, because I mean, maybe not the sales thing, but the stuff that I do, the reason it resonates with people is because they know that I'm speaking the truth, not my truth, not their truth, not like what they want to hear. But I think we're in such a terrible place where so many things aren't true. They aren't real. It's a trick. It's a sales pitch. That actually, if somebody just says that's a man, they know that it's been cut through. Now, that there are people that have used that sort of messaging and it's not been true. Sounds true. They sound authentic. But I think people have had enough. So much so that I remember the first time I heard the word conviction politician a really long time ago for someone like Anne Widdecombe. And I just thought, what do you mean conviction politician? As if like the rest of them weren't, which clearly they weren't. And now we're in a situation where everybody is worried about a soundbite. And I think to have the freedom to be able to speak plainly and somebody to hear you, even if they don't agree with you, they like your style because they know someone like you. Like everybody knows a woman like me that talks a little bit too much and is a little bit too kind of direct, but I'm a familiar, probably older woman in their lives. So I think I'm selling people the empowerment of being able to speak the fucking truth. I honestly think that just by being this quite bold woman, I think it helps that I've got this peroxide blonde hair and I wear a lot of makeup and I appear quite feminine. And then I open my mouth and I'm not submissive, and I don't need to be liked. I genuinely don't need to be liked. In fact, I think there was something wrong if I was universally liked, because it means I'm not saying anything. And so I think I hope I'm selling the idea to women that they are enough. Whatever they think, whatever space they want to protect, whatever language they want to use, however they want to advocate for their kids at school, that is enough. You don't need permission from somebody with a Times column to tell you that how you feel about something is okay, because that is not how we feel about stuff is about.